One question I am consistently asked, aside from what is a TVR, of all the cars I could possibly buy, why would I buy a TVR Cerbera? Well, welcome to Aaron's Eccentric Garage, and also the next episode of my TVR Cerbera import adventure. Now, to help explain why I would buy and import a TVR Cerbera from the United Kingdom, I think it's first important to understand a little bit about my automotive background, which would explain a lot. Although my father did love the 1960s and 70s American muscle cars, ultimately he loved his 1968 Triumph Spitfire. Now, he would take this car to the track, and even in the military was able to get permission to turn the runway into a drag strip and autocross race course on the weekends. Now, fast forward many years later, and my father's love for lightweight German or Japanese or British sports cars was well into my blood. So by the time I was 15 years old, I was actually already owning a 1986 Mazda RX-7. Later on, I purchased a 1986 Porsche 944, a 1997 Mazda Miata, and ultimately my 1993 Mazda RX-7. Now, I did work for Porsche North Scottsdale for 5 years, and during that time, I was able to be exposed to all sorts of different sports cars from around the world on a daily basis. In all my years of owning and driving various sports cars, I've come to the conclusion that I actually prefer to drive a lightweight sports car with a decent amount of power and an emphasis on driver engagement. So in short, I like a driver-focused car.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Now, in an age where throttle, braking, steering, and gauge clusters are either electric or digital, I actually still long for that more traditional mechanical connection that usually only comes from cars that are long discontinued. Now, because I was raised to do most of my own mechanical work, I actually get a great sense of satisfaction and joy by tinkering and really making these cars my own. But I'm also fascinated by the unconventional thinking or unique engineering that cars can have that give them so much character. Now, with all that in mind, let me share some fun details about the TVR Cerbera. And thankfully, I was able to speak with engineer Al Melling, who was the head engineer for TVR's development of the AJP8 engine, the Speed 8 V8 engine on the TVR Cerbera. Now, during our conversation, Al Melling did share with me that at that time, BMW had purchased Rover, and the CEO of that time of TVR, Peter Wheeler, was concerned that BMW would ultimately phase out that engine that they've been using as the lifeblood and the heart of all TVRs pretty much in modern day. So because of this situation, Peter Wheeler ultimately decided that TVR should develop their own engine.
My idea at the time that if we wanted to expand, we ought to make something that we could sell to other people. And I'm not sure Lexus would want to come and buy it for its refinement, but it's a very sporting engine indeed.
Now, because of the design of the chassis, Al Melling ultimately designed a 75-degree single overhead cam 4.2 liter aluminum V8 that produced 430 horsepower at 8,000 RPM that only weighed 271 pounds. Now, this beast of an engine had 2 valves per cylinder, flat top pistons, flat plane crank, and a valve lift of 16 millimeters, which is huge. And it also had a bottom end that was the same as a Formula One car at that time. Now, the engine block was also cast so that it could later be turned into direct injection rather than the standard port fuel injection, which was common at that time. Upon seeing how much power that engine made on the dyno, CEO Peter Wheeler was quoted as saying, "Hell, we need a new car." It was at this time that TVR went to work developing the Cerbera, but with a detuned version of the AJP8, making 360 horsepower at 6,500 RPM and 320 foot-pounds of torque at 4,500 RPM. But also, just like the Ferrari F50's V12 engine, the AJP8 was also designed where it could be a stress member if it was sold and used in a single-seat race car. So to paraphrase, TVR ultimately developed a race engine, put it into a street car, had a 0 to 60 of 4 seconds, and to put this into perspective, that's like a Mazda Miata with nearly twice as much horsepower and torque. So at the end of the day, the TVR Cerbera was built to be a driver-focused car. You won't find things like airbags or ABS or traction control because Peter Wheeler felt that those systems gave drivers a false sense of security. And ultimately, when you're piloting this vehicle, that the one thing you should be doing is driving. In the 7 years of production that TVR built the Cerberas in various engine configurations, they only made about 1,490 of them. And it's estimated that about 800 or so are still on the road today, making this a very rare, very fast sports car that, for its time in a straight line, was faster than a Dodge Viper, a 911 Turbo, Aston Martin Vanquish, a Lotus Esprit, and even a Lamborghini Diablo.
But the clever money was all wrong. Despite the Caterham's lightweight, its tiny engine was no match for this lot. The Porsche surged ahead, but whoa, look at that TVR! The Vantage 2 was struggling, being left miles behind the Blackpool Rocket. 2,300 horsepower here, tearing up the Leicestershire countryside, and at half distance it's still TVR, Porsche, just ahead of the Lotus. Is the TVR going to do it? Can it really do a standing mile in less than 30 seconds? Close! Too close! A bit like the race, really.
The TVR Cerbera is not perfect by any means, though, and like all small production, low volume, hand-built sports cars, they have some weird gremlins and some issues, and also depending on how the previous owner took care of the car could give you a great or bad experience as well. But that's partially why car enthusiasts love these kind of cars, because it's not because they're perfect, but because they are quirky, because they're unique, they give them so much character. So the TVR Cerbera is ultimately a driver-focused, fast and uniquely styled sports car, and I think Jeremy Clarkson probably summed it up best.
You know, whenever I road test a car on top gear, I'm usually left at the end with one abiding memory. The Ferrari 355, the best. The Lamborghini Diablo, brutal. Jaguar, comfortable. Nissan Sunny, well, there's the exception that proves the rule. And this, fast. Very, very fast.